You don't know like I know. Grandmama used to say that a long time ago. She's dead and gone. But I'm a witness. You don't know like I know.
Oh, how he walks with me. Oh, how he talks with me. Yeah. Oh, how he tells me I am his own.
You know my name. You know my name. You know my name. You know my name. Oh, how you comfort me. And oh, how you counsel me. And it still amazes me that I am your friend. So now I pour out my heart to you. Yes. Here in your presence I am made new. So now I pour out my heart to you. Giving you my heart, Lord. Here in your presence I am made new. And you know my name. You know my name. You know my name. You know my name. Oh, how you walk with me.
How he walks with me.
Oh, how you talk with me.
Oh, how he talks with me.
Oh, how you tell me.
Oh, how he tells me
That I am your own.
I am your
God, you know me, so I trust you with my life. Oh, so no fire can burn me, no battle can turn me, no mountain can stop me, 'cause you hold my hand. I'm walking in your victory, 'cause your power is within me. No giant can defeat me, 'cause you hold my hand. No fire can burn me, no battle can stop me, no mountain can stop me, 'cause you hold my hand. Oh, I'm walking in your victory. Your power is within me. No giant is not gonna stop me. You hold my hand. It's not gonna burn me. It's already won.
turn me. No
It can't stop. Why? Because And oh, how you talk with me. Oh, how you tell me
How you tell me, yeah,
that I
I am
am
yours.
your
Thank God. Thank God. Come on, worship him in this place. Worship him, worship him. He is worthy, he's worthy. How many of you know he knows your name and he knows your pain? He knows it all. Thank God. Praise the Lord. Thank you, choir. Blessing us. Keeping it real. Perhaps many of you have probably seen it, and if you haven't, Burger King has collaborated with the organization Mental Health America to raise awareness about mental health. And they did that to partner with them in Mental Health Awareness Month, which of course is May. And they did that by introducing this past Thursday what they call real meals. These real meals are 5 different meal boxes, each of them carrying a different color, and each color is to represent a different mood. There are 5 different meals. Each of those boxes has within it a Whopper, fries, and you get a shake with it. There's been some controversy about why they would do this, because some feel that they would only do this to engage, to make more money, and to have a surge in revenue. But their whole objective was to partner with the Mental Health America to raise awareness so that people can learn how to embrace that people are not okay all the time. They have now coined this slogan, not just have it your way, it is hashtag feel your way. There are different moods, and you research it. I cannot give you 2 of the meals because they are not appropriate language for church. But one happens to be a sad meal, one happens to be a mad meal, one happens to be a yaz or excited meal, and there are 2 others that I want you to research for homework. They've even released a commercial in recent days to show that there are various people who have gone through various mood swings, and the whole objective and the slogan that is associated with this commercial is simply this, that it's okay not to be okay all the time. Even to the point now that it's been released, I think, in major cities across the United States. It's been released in Los Angeles, it's been released in Seattle, Miami, and even Austin, Texas. It hadn't made it to Tennessee yet. I wish it would. But this whole thing about hashtag feel your way and admitting that it's okay not to be okay all the time is certainly a reality in all of our lives. Because the truth of the matter is, we are not okay all the time. And to add insult to injury, the body of Christ has sometimes taught a theology, especially within the church, that somehow it is sinful to be depressed and sad and grieve and to feel downtrodden. And the nature of it is that what happens when people are experiencing trauma and people who are going through mental health challenges, and the body of Christ teaches that it is sinful to be depressed and sad and grieve and feel down, because really the whole issue of mental health is not always to be addressed as a spiritual issue. That there are other issues that happen that are the source and the cause of people who are going through mental health challenges. I mean, one of those causes is that there are people who have been attacked by trauma that has happened in their life. And the trauma that they've experienced has brought about these different moods and feelings. I mean, people who have been through divorce, people who have experienced death, people who are undergoing serious illness, and people who have been injured, people who have experienced violence, rape, and have gone through natural disaster. And the reality is, when people have gone through that, the church doesn't need to always approach it as a spiritual issue. As a matter of fact, we need to allot room for people who have gone through stuff that we have no idea of what they've gone through. We need to give them the opportunity to feel like they feel sometimes. And if you're a witness in this place, you are sitting next to somebody every Sunday morning who you have no idea what they've had to go through in their life. And the reality is, there are moments that they just want to feel like they feel. They want to have moments where they say it's okay not to be okay all the time. The church, in these situations of people who have been attacked by trauma in their life, that the church needs to be able to say #feel your way. And it's okay to not be okay all the time. And I think I've got some witnesses in here who knows that you have those I'm not okay moments. And there are moments that I want to tell the truth about how I feel. I'm upset sometimes. I'm weak sometimes. I'm struggling with God sometimes. I'm asking God questions. Is there anybody in Orchard Knob who knows that every now and then you just want to feel your way sometimes? As a matter of fact, you come to church some Sundays and you don't feel like standing on your feet and clapping your hands and lifting up your hands and giving God the praise. Sometimes I ain't feeling like you feel, but I just come to tell somebody that when you've gone through what you've gone through, it's okay to admit that you're not okay. Is there anybody here that knows in this life it won't always be sunshine? And when you're in that place when you've experienced trauma and you've gone through that moment where you've had various mood swings and you just literally feeling your way, here it is, saints. It's not faithlessness, it's called humanness. It is Paul Maxwell in his article, Trauma is Not a Life Sentence, that he says that there are countless stories in the church of how the church blanches traumatic experiences and ongoing disasters with some reductionistic redemptive strategy. Literally, that is interpreted to mean that sometimes we tell people who are going through the most traumatic times of our life to just pray about it, and in 7 days it's going to all be gone. Sometimes we say just take your burdens to the Lord and leave them there. But is there anybody here that knows beyond the shadow of a doubt that by doing that we strip and deny people the right to be human, and we undercut and offend offend them of the necessity of just getting it out. Can I pause real quick and just ask somebody to know that one of the best remedies in getting to where you need to be is just getting it out sometimes. And that's what church ought to be about. I ought to be able to just come and get it out sometime. Watch the second thing, without people judging and trying to figure out what I'm going through. I'm looking for about 10 of y'all in here who knows beyond the shadow of a doubt, when I come to church, I just want to get it out sometimes. And if I could keep it real, it ain't always going good in my life. Shame on those superficial supermen and super church women who every time you see them, they're always blessed and highly favored, and they got it going on in the hood. But I'm looking for about 10 of you in here who knows that Monday there's hell, Tuesday there's hell, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even Sunday morning, I ain't always feeling like you feeling. But this article goes on to say that those of us who've experienced trauma in their life, and I'm not talking about just the kind of trauma that makes you sit in a dark room in a corner, because the whole issue of trauma is that deep distress, emotional disturbance, watch this, that happens to all of us. The article goes on to say and argue that in the most deepest moments in your trauma, God gives 5 gifts to the traumatized. I want to take just a few moments to argue one of those moments. Here it is. This gonna bless you. That one of the things that God gives me as a gift when I've experienced trauma in my life, here it is he allows me to feel with my faith. Let me say it like this. He allows us the permission to process our pain. He allows us to feel with our faith, meaning that there are moments that he will allow your humanness to just say how you feel and what's going on in your life. Well, you're looking at me strange. I brought a few witnesses on my own. Tell them, Paul. Paul says, listen, I'm an apostle of Jesus Christ, sent by God. As a matter of fact, I wrote most of the books in the New Testament. I'm a one that was sold out for God because I got arrested on the Damascus Road, and here I am preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. But I've got to admit that even as a man of faith, can I keep it real just for a moment? I was stoned one time. I was shipwrecked 5 times, beaten with rods, and going to cities and in danger over and over again. And if you ain't feeling Paul, let me call another witness. Come here, Jesus, because the reality is Jesus kept it real. Don't you see him in the Garden of Gethsemane when he's saying, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful? Don't you hear him when he goes a little further and he says something like this, Father, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine will be done. And if that ain't good enough for you, don't you hear him hanging on a cross, keeping it real, saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? If Paul can keep it real, and if Jesus keeps it real, then there is some justification of the psalmist in Psalm 142, who gives this lament. That literally means this is his cry. This is his lament to God about his situation, and I submit to you, he kept it real. It is, my brothers and sisters, good sense to really pick up and preach what is one of the most keeping it real categories of the Psalms that there are. These are the Psalms of lament. Psalm 142 falls into that category of a psalm of lament. One, it's filled and contained, comprised of weeping. It is the expression of people of faith who keeps it real. Notice that a psalm of lament is really a prayer and a hymn that God has chosen to use to teach us how to express ourselves in worship. It almost seems to be a contradiction, but if you look at the structure of all the various psalms of lament, all of them began with anguish, but they end up in adoration. That's really a picture of the struggle of the people of faith. Because in one sense, we are just keeping it real and expressing the feelings of our flesh. But if you're a child of God and you've been born again, it ought to always result in an expression of faith. Let me rewind it. There are moments that I'm weak, but there are moments that you'll hear me worship. And that's the struggle that all of us in here have with God. There are moments that we will say, Lord, I give up. Lord, I can't do it. But there are other times that I say, Lord, you are mighty. Lord, you are strong. Can I preach to you who have struggles in your faith? Can I find you with your hand lifted up to say, preacher, every Sunday you won't always see me in worship, but sometimes you'll see me in my weakness. This Psalm of Lament was written by David. Most believe that the occasion behind the writing of the psalm is when David is now being pursued by the indignant, evil, jealous King Saul. You would know that David has experienced much success in battle, even to the point that when he kills Goliath and then he leads strong and mighty in the battle against the Philistines. When Saul and David comes back, you'll see the people on the street singing this song. Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. And all of a sudden there is an evil spirit of indignation and jealousy that enters the heart of King Saul. And Saul is jealous, and because of his jealousy, it now makes him go after the life of David. Jonathan, who is Saul's son, happens to have fallen in love with David. They are bosom buddies. They are close. Their hearts, the Bible says, have been knit together. And it is Jonathan who lets David in on the fact that his daddy is trying to pursue him. And if you read 1 Samuel from chapter number 18 all the way to chapter 22, you would note that David now finds himself in the cave of Adullam, hiding from King Saul and his men. He's in a dark place. He's in an emotional place. His spirit now has been disordered and distressed. He is not just in the darkness of the cave. He's in the dark place in the cave of his mind. And there he is, all alone, just he and God. But because of faith's default, he resorts to prayer under God. Can I just pause for a minute and say to you, if you're in a dark place, if you are now in that place of hiding and solitude and you have literally no other resource, you always got prayer. But this is not one of those muted prayers. This is not one of these silent, cute, articulate prayers. When you read the psalm in its entirety, you will see the repeated phrase over and over again that David just ain't praying, he's crying out to the Lord. And I'll tell you what we need, saints. We need some saints who are not ashamed to cry out to the Lord. I'm not talking about those prayers where you got to be articulate and always crossing your T's and dotting your I's. But can I find at least a witness in here who knows that your situation doesn't call for acute prayer? That sometimes God puts you in some precarious predicaments that the only thing you got left is is to throw your hands up in the air, wave them like you just don't care, and say, Father, I stretch. If you're concerned about getting out at 11:15, y'all better be over that already. He's in a dark place, but he cries out to the Lord, and throughout this prayer, this is, if you will, David's keep it real prayer. But watch this, it is mingled with a faith in God that on one side says, Lord, I'm in trouble. But on the other side, Lord, I know you're still able. That on one side I'm weak, but on the other side you're still worthy of worship. I thought I had a doggone witness right along through here who knows that that's the struggle of every one of us. Sometimes my flesh gets the best of me. But there's sometimes when I get a surge of faith, and just because you see me weak, don't mean that I don't trust God. When you see me in my low moments, I don't believe that God hadn't brought me this far to leave me. But on one side, I'm a person of flesh. But underneath it all, I'm a person of faith. So it seems the reason, church, on my way to my seat, that if David is justified to keep it real, and I want to use my next few minutes to say, you ought to keep it real. However you feel, keep it real. Admit that in the heat of your trouble, that it's okay not to be okay all the time. Can I tell y'all why that's important? It's important because in doing so, in keeping it real, we will discover that we are not alone as we feel. It then reminds me that we serve a God who understands, that we don't have a high priest who cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but in all points he was tempted like us, yet he was without sin. And so when I understand who Jesus is, it makes me more appreciative to thank God that we serve a Jesus, watch this, who would sleep when he got tired in the boat, who would ask for food after he was raised up from the dead, who would get on the cross and say, I thirst, who would bleed when he was on a cross, who had nail scars in his hands and had rough hands because he was a hard-working carpenter. Can I look for a witness in here that ought to just thank God for 15 seconds that when I pray to God, I serve a God who knows what I'm dealing with because he's already been through what I've been through. Can I go Baptist and tell you there's not a friend like the lowly Jesus? No, not one. No, not one. Jesus knows about our struggles and he will guide us until the day is done. Touch your neighbor and say there is not a friend like the lowly Jesus. I got somebody who's been there and done that. When I pray, I'm not praying to a God who is not so intellectual that he will not be intimate. The reason he can answer your prayer to the Father is because he already knows what you're going through. And so I quit. But I think I need to share with you that this prayer, this lament, this keeping it real prayer of David teaches you and I how to feel with our faith. It teaches us how to process with our pain. And you will notice the progression of David's prayer. Saw how a man of faith kept it real with God. Let me give it to you in 3 phrases. Notice his prayer. He talks to God from his hurt. He tells God what's on his heart. And then finally, he tells God he needs his help. There's the sermon. Don't y'all leave right there. I ain't through. Watch this. He talks to God from his hurt. When you look at verse 1 and 2, I'm moving. He says, with my voice, I cry out to the Lord. With my voice, I plead for mercy to the Lord. Verse 2 says, I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. Notice when you see the words of verse 1 and 2, you can easily detect the pain and the anguish that David is going through. Note, church, he's talking to God, but he's crying while he's doing it. I want you to quickly see how diverse his prayer is. One, let me suggest to you, according to verse number 1, his prayer was loud. Verse 1, with my voice, I cry out to the Lord. The Hebrew word there literally means that this is a shrill and a shriek. I mean, this is not muted. This is a roar that comes from an animal that has been inflicted with pain. He cries out to the Lord. He opens up his mouth and he lets his roar out to the Lord because of his deep anguish. Have you ever had to cry? Oh, young people, you got it good now. Keep on living. You hard men who are too robust and too masculine to shed a tear, I got some reality checks for you. Life will make you shed some tears. Wish I had a witness in here. You men who are ashamed to come before God and the church to pray, trouble will put you on your knees. Life will make you open up your mouth and let out a scream. If you can scream if Golden State wins it all, you ought to be able to come in church and open up your mouth. Or when your favorite college dude got drafted to your NFL team, you screamed and had a draft party. What's wrong with you in the church of God? To come before God and come before this assembly and open up your mouth and be able to admit your hurts. It was loud. But look in the next part of the verse. It was longing. Notice what he says. He says, with my voice, I plead for mercy to the Lord. I got to hurry, y'all. But he says, I plead for mercy to the Lord. The NIV actually says that I lift up my voice to the Lord. But you see this word pleading that you see in verse 1, part A, there is a bellowing out. But here in the second part of verse 1, there is a beseeching. You hear a deep begging. He is literally pleading with God. This is a picture of an inferior on his knees in a posture of humility, asking the superior who alone has the authority to do what he needs to do. Life has a way of not only bringing us to a cry, but life has a way of bringing us to a place of humility. That we can know and understand that there are some things that we cannot do on our own, that there are some things that only God can do. Do you hear the anguish of King David? He is at the point where he is loud. Watch this. He is longing, but then notice in verse 2, he is telling God his prayer with all liberality. Notice the text. He says, I pour out my complaint before him. Listen to that. I pour out my complaint before him. Look at the next part. I tell my trouble before him. This is literally saying that when David is talking to God in the cave, he's letting it all hang out. He is literally spilling. Listen, the word pour is a picture of the offerings and sacrifice of either blood or libations. Y'all know what libations are, don't you? Will you touch somebody and say wine? This is an offering of libation and blood. It literally means that they would spill forth the offerings on the altar of God. David uses this imagery to say that when he goes before God, he tells God everything. He pours it all out. I mean, have you ever met that person that you only just wanted to stop and talk to just for a moment, and it ended up being about a 30-minute conversation? It was supposed to be about one thing, but they end up telling their whole life story. Y'all feeling me in here? And that's the same thing it is. Whatever David was thinking, whatever he was going through, he has literally poured it out before God. But I don't want you to miss your place to shout, because I need you to pay close attention to David moving from the diversity of his prayer to the direction of his prayer. Look, church, here it is. Don't miss it. He says in verse 1, I cry out to the Lord. The next part of verse 1 in the NIV says, I lift up my voice to the Lord. It appears that crying out to the Lord and lifting up his voice to the Lord, that the Lord is in an elevated place, that he seems to be in a high and lifted up place. He appears at this point to be a distant deity, but in verse 2 he becomes a faithful friend. Notice the proximity of this prayer, because in verse 2 he says, I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. Do you see the distinction, church? I cry out to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord. But in verse 2 he's saying, I will tell my trouble before him. It appears now that God has been in the cave with David. Now David realizes that he ain't talking up to the Lord, but it is as if he's having a face-to-face conversation with God. Can I preach to somebody here who knows that that's what prayer will do? Prayer will get God's attention, and it'll make you think at one point that you got to lift your voice to the Lord, but when you talk to the Lord, when you can't go to the Lord will come to you. Can I just stop real quick and tell somebody that it is up to you to realize that God is an omnipresent God, that he's everywhere at the same time. I need to preach like I feel it, that on one sense we got a God who made the cosmos. We got a God who is above the clouds, but when you pray to God, he'll get in your cave. You miss your place to shout. I said God is above the cosmos. He is above the clouds, but when you talk to the Lord, is there anybody here that knows that God will get in the cave with you? I gotta hurry. But the good thing about David's faith, don't just hear what he's crying. Look who he's crying to. I need a witness in here. He's crying to the Lord. The Lord God Jehovah, who's the self-existent one, who's the eternal God, who is the supreme God. David wants all of us in this room to know that when you cry, when you pray, when you weep, when you lament, if you're a child of God, your tears are not wasted because of who you're crying to. Because it seems the reason if I'm going to cry, I need to cry to the right person. Just a few weeks ago, I was having some work done on my house, Deacon Whitten, and I had to get the house painted. And I went to Sherwin-Williams, got my paint, contractor, and he painted the upstairs, and then when he came down, Deacon Flint, to the downstairs, the same color paint that we got for the upstairs, we got it for the downstairs, but when he put the paint on the downstairs, it was 2 different shades. I mean, he'd already put a whole coat on it, and you could see it when it dried. You saw that it was 2 different coats. So when he brought it to my attention, I tried to make sure I act as pastorally and as Christianly as I could. And so at this point, I go down to Sherwin-Williams, and as a matter of fact, when I go to the counter, the same sisters, you know, it was a mistake, but the same sister who mixed up the paint was the one that I was talking to. And so, you know, I'd already set my price with the contractor, and we had already spent all that money on the paint. And at this particular point, I'm just rattling off. I'm just, you know, going through the whole story about, you know, how hard I worked for my money. And you know how we do, y'all. You know, we got to go back and tell the whole story. And, you know, we got to get this done, and I've already paid the contractor a certain amount, and my money is only good with the contractor for certain things, and so I'm going through this whole story, and by this time, she turns me on, and she says, let me let you talk to him. And so I talk to this other guy, and I go through the whole story. I mean, he ain't cut me off. He's literally letting me tell the whole story, only to get to the end of my complaint that he says, well, listen, sir, what I need you to do is tell that to my GM. And I'm sitting there saying, I wasted all this time crying out and lamenting to somebody who ain't got no power to change my situation. And I thought I'd come on my way to heaven to ask you a question. Who are you crying to? Because there ain't no sense in praying and talking to folk who don't have no authority to deal with your situation. Whatever your situation is, you need to talk to God who can do something about your situation. If you're sick, tell the doctor, but then pray to the God who's the healer of all of your diseases. If you're in legal trouble, go and get your attorney, but talk to another attorney who is an advocate with the Father. Oh yeah, I forgot, he happens to be the son of the judge. You will go get that lawyer who's never lost a case. If you're broke, go and try to get a loan, but if you don't get it, talk to a God who owns a cattle upon 1,000 hills, who owns the silver and the gold. Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Is there anybody here that knows it's okay to cry, but make sure you're crying to the right person? I'm getting out of this. But talk to him from your hurt. But I got 2 more. Secondly, if you're going to keep it real, tell him what's on your heart. I'm hurrying. Look in verse 3 and 4. We get an opportunity now to hear in verses 1 and 2 David crying. We don't really know what it is. You can't really make sense out of crying. You know, when you're trying to talk to somebody or they're trying to talk to you and they're crying and they're hollering, you can't make sense out of what they're saying. Can I give y'all one more thing to shout on? We got a God who can interpret your tears. You probably can't get it out, but God knows how to interpret your cry. But it is in verses 3 and 4 that we now move to hear the details of David's heart. Dr. McCord, God has the stethoscope up to his chest. God has the readout of his EKG. He's got the details. And now we get a chance to hear with clarity what David is going through. Crying in verses 1 and 2, but now he's telling God exactly what's on his heart. Notice what he says. He says, when my spirit faints within me, you know my way. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see there is none who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for my soul. Let me hurry through this. There are three areas that David tells God about his heart. He says, let me say a word about my faintness. Then let me say a word about my foes. But then let me say a word about my feeling forsaken. Notice in verse 3, he says, my spirit faints within me. You know my way. Listen, when he talks about the spirit, church, this is the seat of emotion. This is a place now where David wants us to understand that he is at a place where he is in emotional frenzy. He is at the point and place where his spirit is fainting. He's at a low moment. He's an emotional wreck. But look at the shout. When my spirit faints within me, you know my way. Watch this, watch this. This is incredible. The word know is the Hebrew word yada. And yada literally means to know intimately. This is not just David saying that God is aware of my situation. This is David saying that God knows my situation so well that he's getting in the trouble with me. You remember when the children of Israel were in Egyptian bondage and they were crying out to God for deliverance? Exodus chapter 3, I hear God saying this. I have heard of your cry. Watch this. I know about your sufferings. But here's the thing that shouts me. And I have come down. Look at the sophisticated folk in here today. To deliver you out of the hand of the Egyptians. That literally says that not only does God know, not only does God hear, but God will come down. And that's what he did in Jesus. He heard our cry. He knew our groans, but he came down. Then David moves from his faintness to his foes. You all got them. You do know you got foes, don't you? Wait a minute. You know you got enemies, don't you? Oh, I didn't get all of it. You knew you got haters, don't you? In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. This is David keeping it real, y'all. He says, I got some enemies, and they are looking for me. I mean, you just take the time out to read 1 Samuel 18 and read all of those verses, all of those chapters. You will see the relentless pursuit of Saul and his henchmen doing everything they can to find David. But you know the good news is? The good news is God not only knows our pain, God knows our paths. And it is a picture of how God has gone ahead of David to make sure that he already deals and reveals to him the traps and the tricks and the deceitful snares and traps of the enemy. Anybody thank God for a God who goes ahead of you, who will lead out as the shepherd, and he already is making sure that your enemies can't get to you, because the God who knows our pain knows our path. But then David gets to the end and he says, not only am I faint, not only do I have foes, but in verse 4 he says, I'm feeling forsaken. He says, look to the right. See, there is none who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for my soul. Let me just put it to you like this. David says, look to the right and see, there is none who takes notice of me. David says, I don't have any companion. Then he says, there is none who takes notice of me. David said, there is no one who is concerned about me. No refuge remains to me. He says, I have no cover. But then no one cares for my soul. I have no compassion. Here David is alone in the cave with God. faint, got foes, and he feels forsaken. Can I use my imagination for a moment? He's in the cave. And since he's in the cave, we're getting ready to see in verses 5 through 7 that there's getting ready to be a surge of faith that's getting ready to take place. Verses 1 and 2, keeping it real. Verse 3 and 4, keeping it real in my flesh. But then my faith is about to experience a surge. And I believe that while David was talking in the cave, his echo came back to him. And he was hearing himself in a place of weakness. Because sometimes God will use your own moments of weakness to turn around and surge your faith. As if to say, you need to sometimes hear how foolish you sound. Can I give it to you like this? The melody of your misery can transform into a ministry for your memory. Say that again, Carlos, just one more time, just one more time. Just come on, touch somebody and say, just tell them to say it one more time, one more time. I said the melody of your misery can turn around to be a ministry for your memory. Let me translate. It means that when you sound weak, God will let you hear yourself so you can think back over your life of how God brought you out before, how God paid your bills before, how God healed your marriage before, how God healed your body before. Is there anybody here that knows when you're at your moment of weakness, it can transform into worship? I'm hollering at y'all. Here's the last one. He's keeping it real. He talks to God from his hurt. He talks to God from his heart. But I'm sitting down. I held you long enough. But he tells God he needs help. That's what I want to sit down with. Tell God you need some help. I'm quitting. Verse 5, 6, and 7. I cry to you, O Lord. You are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Attend to my cry, for I'm brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Verse 7, bring me out of prison, that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. Can I stop real quick and tell you at this point, David has experienced a surge of faith. Aren't you grateful, church? I said, aren't you grateful, church, that God places within you a faith that'll be renewed, that God puts in you a faith that'll be restored. Let me put it like this. Thank God that you don't have to have a faith that you got to keep, but you got a faith that will learn how to keep you. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't have it all together all the time. I don't feel the way you feel all the time. There are moments that I'm weak, but every now and then, God will give you a surge of strength. I'm quitting, but David, in verse 5, 6, and 7, affirms the sufficiency of God. He says, watch this, you are my refuge. I don't have time to quit it. Listen, he said, you are my portion. He sounds doubtful in verses 1 through 4, but he sounds definite in verses 5 and 6. And every now and then, church, you got to get to a place that there are some things you ought not be doubting, but some things you know beyond the shadow of a doubt. And I don't know your life and you don't know mine, but I at least know God well enough to know that he has given you some blessings and he has shown you how he has the power to bring you out. He affirms the sufficiency of God. You are my refuge. You are my portion. But then secondly, he acknowledges the dependency he has on God. He's keeping it real. And when he gets to verse 6, he says, attend to my cry, for I am brought very low. When he gets to verse 6, he says, deliver me from my persecutors, for they're too strong for me. Verse 7, bring me out of prison, that I may give thanks to your name. Let me give you the short version. He says two things. Lord, hear me, but Lord, help me. That's the short version. Attend to my cry. Have sharp ears. Incline your ear to me. But he not only says, hear me, he says, help me. Listen, saints. He says, attend to my cry because I'm brought very low. Have you been at that place? When you feel like you've gone as far as you can go. I'm humbled by my circumstance. And God puts us in those positions where it ain't no longer nothing I can do but totally depend on God. He says, I'm brought low. Now I need you to help me. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. But then in verse 7, bring me out of prison. Let me tell you what he's not talking about. We know he's in a cave, but he is in the prison of his mind. He's in a black hole, and he can't get out. But I'm through. Because at this point, David has not caved in because of who's in the cave. I'm through. I'm going to say it one more time for those of you who are looking at me like a monkey in a glass case. I said, he has not caved in. Because he knows who's in the cave with him. Well, the ushers are getting up, so that's my cue. They want me to close, but let me close it like I want to close it. Since they want to get off work early and everything. Here it is. He's in the cave. Are y'all in here with me? If you think you are in this thing by yourself, I want to introduce you to somebody who knows what it is to be in a tight place. I'm going to see if y'all can catch it for those of you who know it. He wasn't in a tomb. He wasn't in a cave. He was in the tomb. And by the power of God, all I know, I don't know how he did it. I wasn't there. Nobody saw him when he got up. But while he was closed in the tomb, all I know is that the record says that the stone was rolled away. I ain't got nothing else to preach. I'm just waiting on the shouters. And the whole point is that if the Lord can handle tombs, he can handle your cave. Y'all ain't praying with me. I said, if the Lord can handle tombs, he can handle caves. I don't know about you, but whenever you're in a tight place, whenever you are in a bad place, we serve a God who is able to handle tight places. Thank God for Jesus, for he knows how to handle caves. I got to bid y'all a good evening, but I need to tell you, as I open with the Burger King real meals, that there is a backstory to the front story. Because I told you that when you see that there's a different color box that is associated with the meals and the moves that you're in, there is also a cross and a crown that you get at Burger King. And every one of them has a different color to match the box. And when I looked at the commercial of the different color of the crowns, the Holy Spirit said, Carlos, don't turn the channel. I need you to look at the top of the crown. Yeah, because at the top of the crown there is crosses that are at the top of the crown, and the cross represents Jesus that knows how you feel. Do I have a witness here? And when you look at the cross of Jesus, then you know that it also represents triumph over your situation and your feelings. God bless you, Orchard Knob, but is there anybody here that can lift your hands and thank God that no matter what your situation is, Jesus knows how you feel? Touch somebody and say, whatever it is, the cross can handle your situation. And if the Lord can handle your cross, he can handle your cave. You ought to rejoice if you know he'll bring you out. Won't he bring you out? Say yes, he will. Won't he bring you out? I'm holding y'all long enough, but I gotta sit down now. When I tell you these words, don't cave in, because God is in the cave. Look at somebody and say, neighbor, don't cave in. Jesus is in the cave. Give God glory, because he's in the cave. And whatever it is, he can bring you through it. Stand to your feet. He's in the cave. And you don't have to cave in. You don't have to do it. Feel your way. Tell God from your hurts, from your heart. Tell him you need his help. Won't he come to your rescue? He'll do it, church. He'll come to your rescue. There may be somebody in this place today who needs a Savior. And if you're here today, this is a good place to come. Yeah, he'll help you. He'll help you. He'll help you. He'll help you. If there's anyone else. Yes. He'll bring you through it. He'll bring you through it. He'll bring you through it. This place. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Think about the moments that you've had when you've been in your dark place. Listen, all of us can be one tragedy away from going through trauma. And so everybody you see that maybe have some mental illness, they're not crazy. They're just being human. And they're trying to feel their way through it. The thank God we can keep it real. And we talk to God about it. We get an understanding to know that we serve a Jesus who is real to us. He understands it. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. You may take your seats. Musicians, continue to play. Thank God for his goodness. Thank God for his grace. Sister Wheeler.
Pastor Williams, associate ministers, officers, members, and friends. First, we have Brother Alex Ragland. He desires membership with this church. He's united by Christian experience.
Amen. God bless you. Alex, you're coming to us today in the Christian experience. It says you know the Lord Jesus, you've been baptized, and you would like to unite with this church. You're a regular person here. We have always counted you as a brother and as a member of this church. And so now it's on today that you've made it official, and I want to thank God for you. And we're going to make sure we connect you with individuals to help you grow in your faith. So let me be the first to welcome you and thank God officially to be a part of our church. Come on, let's thank God. You all have come for prayer. Okay. If you all will turn around, and I'm going to ask you to stretch forth your hands. Brother and sister Kurt, you all come right here. Amen. Amen. If you will turn around and join hands. Church, stretch forth your hands to the front, as God already knows any situation, and he knows whatever issues that they may be going through. Let's believe in prayer. Father, I thank you now for this opportunity, Lord, to worship you and to come before your people. And then, God, I come lifting up Brother Ragland, Lord, who has come to unite with us. And then Brother Amos and Sister Maddie Kirk, Lord, who've come for prayer. You're an omniscient God, and you know everything, and you know all things.